Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. It is your host, Angelica, spiritual entrepreneur and intuitive healer. And I'm recording this on Valentine's Day, February 14th. So there's so much love in the air, and I really love this time of year. I used to hate it and be like, oh, what a stupid holiday. But I think the more that we turn towards Valentine's Day being a time to honor ourselves and take time for self-care, and then also to really honor a lot of our female friendships. I know as a woman, I just feel like this holiday highlights that now. It's less for me when I see it about couples and relationships, while it certainly can still be that. And it's so fun to do that. Like I've had so many texts with all my friends, just celebrating ourselves, and it's so fun. I'm going out to dinner tonight with my group of friends, and I hope you're doing something just to celebrate yourself and taking some self-care this week, no matter what day it really is. And we'll start with a little energy update before we get into today's podcast episode with one of my current clients, Lindsey, who is a Vata entrepreneur. I'm excited to get into that because I know a lot of you relate to the Vata dosha and wanting to start your business, and it was a really incredible episode. So before we get into that, we just had our new moon last week, if you are watching or listening to this on time. And that new moon was in Capricorn. And we also had the sun, of course, in Capricorn, because every time it's a new moon, the sun and the moon are in the same sign. And we also had Mars exalted in Capricorn, and we had Mercury in Capricorn. So lots of this like Capricorn type of energy, which is a grounding type of energy rooted in ancient wisdom and ambitions and hard work. And it's really good for entrepreneurs as well. So there's a lot of forward energy happening right now with Mars exalted. Mars is the planet of moving forward and action and motivation and inspiration. So those of us who are ruled by Mars, Scorpios and Aries specifically, if you have those signs that are prominent in your chart, you may feel like very motivated lately and having a lot of this forward energy. All planets are direct until April. So we can really ride that wave, especially if you're starting new projects and goals and ambitions. It's a really good time for that. And specifically, this last new moon was around building your own wealth. So some of us may be experiencing actually opportunities to bring in more abundance. Now, I say that and it sounds all flashy and shiny, but to be honest, I think January and February was months of huge transformation. So we've gone through a lot of grief periods for some of us. There's been a lot of letting go. There's been a lot that's been swirling around. And I see a lot of that starting to settle and start to make sense now as we're airing towards the end of February and into March. So just kind of still be with the lessons that you've learned in those transformations, because that's always going to be the foundation of how you're creating more of these opportunities and moments of abundance in your life that can be so, so beautiful. So hopefully the hard stuff and the suffering is over just for this little stage of life, and we can start to enjoy some things coming into fruition. Okay, now for today's episode with Lindsey Smith. So I worked with Lindsey last year. She was one of my great clients, and we worked for an extended period of time. I think it was like 6 to 9 months or something like that. And we were working on just getting her business started and off the ground. And a lot of times for Vata entrepreneurs, what's the most difficult about getting their businesses off the ground is really being able to trust themselves that they can be an experienced healer and sit in that seat and have enough value to give to others, especially Vatas who tend to be more inclined towards spirituality and speaking on a lot of spiritual topics. Feel really scary for them to step into that role, and all of a sudden they haven't had an Instagram before or haven't shown their face, and all of a sudden they're coming out as this like spiritual healer. It can feel really confronting. So that's really what I worked on a lot with Lindsey in the beginning, was getting to see her value in her gifts. And she actually had so many credentials and so much experience as a healer, which I often work with women who do and who have that, but she wasn't able to really see it for herself. And of course, everyone has their own traumas and conditionings of why that was that we have to work through. But ultimately, the thing that we share is truly being seen in the truth of who we are, of what we wanted to share. So in this episode, we got into first what inspired her to start her own business and how she knew how to take that leap. I know so many of you are in that place where you have this job, you're like, I know this is not fulfilling. I'm meant to serve something that feels bigger and that feels like I'm serving a higher purpose, and you want to get out of that. And sometimes it really is this process that we talk through where it's not just like, oh, I made the leap and the next day I'm off the job. You have to really be ready for that time. And she says specifically why and she was able to take that leap and when she really knew it in her own body. Then we really talked about that fear of being seen and hiding. As I said for Lindsay, like she didn't want to show her face at all. Like it was terrifying for her. The thought of her recording a video of herself was so scary. And I totally relate to that. In the beginning of my business, I share this all the time. The first year I had my Instagram, I didn't show my face at all. I didn't want to be on video. I just wanted to write, create the content, and not show up. I hated it. And we have these preconceived notions of what other people are going to think of us when we put that stuff out there that we just need to get truthful and honest with. So for me, I just didn't want to feel like I was being a salesperson. I didn't want to feel like I was being an attention hog just from wanting to be on Instagram. Like I was doing this just to get the fame or be on stage or something like that. Once you can hear that voice and understand that, you realize, oh, that's not really the reason why. Of course, I want to be seen and for what I'm doing and how I'm helping others heal, but that's not my main reason. And so once you really root back into what your mission is, it becomes super clear. And that's what it was for Lindsay. She just needed to get really clear on, well, why do I really want to share this? And it's always from a heart-centered place, but our ego makes it seem like we want it for different reasons, and we just have to face that and come to terms with it. We also really got into that conversation of spirituality and that scary thing of being able to share how you connect with spirituality. A lot of experienced healers, especially those who relate to the Vata dosha, have this where it's like, I want to share these things that are really out there and I am terrified of sharing them. So for Lindsay specifically, she really relates to spirit by calling spirit God and this deep relationship that she has built with God and getting these channel messages. And she really pushed that away for so long until it became so prominent and obvious that that was what felt really good for her. And now she's sharing it so unapologetically. I'll link her Instagram in the show notes so you can see all her reels and videos. She just eloquently speaks about God and how God helps her heal. And it's so beautiful. And now she's able to really attract that specific client who wants to work with God. Another thing that we talk about is being able to trust and know your specific person that you're trying to help and that you can't be for everyone. This is like the most thing that I work on with a lot of my healers is saying that you cannot be for everyone. You're not going to be able to help heal everyone, but the more that you can stand really clear in how you want to share your offerings and what you want to share about, and your clients will just naturally come to you and attract to you because they're interested in that thing. But the more specific you can be about that, the more successful you truly will be. And lastly, we talked about the fear of being seen again and how it can show up later with different costumes. So even though we've healed that fear of being seen for her by she was able to show her face on social media and reels, it's still showing up currently in her business, but just in more subtle ways. And that I think brings us the most compassion on our healing journey because we think like, well, who am I now to start sharing information when I still haven't healed this? The truth is there's always going to be things and layers that we're healing. So I love that Lindsay was able to share that trajectory of herself where she was so afraid to even put up her story, her personal healing story on her website for fear of what past relationships would have said about it. And now that she's so visible on social media and she's starting to work with clients and it feels so good and aligned, and she really just needed to face that fear and continuously work with it and see how it still shows up in her business. So I'm so excited for you to get into Lindsay's stories. It's going to be so great for a lot of my Vatas who are having trust issues in yourself and in your spirituality. It'll be such a huge confident boost. And you can follow Lindsay and her work. I'll have all that linked in the show notes. She's spectacular. If you love this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who would love it too. If you can rate a review on Spotify and Apple, that would mean the world to me. I absolutely love seeing all your comments and how you connect with the podcast. That keeps me going, and I'll love continuing putting out this content for all of you. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I'm super excited to have one of my sweet, dear clients, Lindsey Mary Smith, who is a spiritual mentor on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here, Lindsey.
I'm happy that you asked me to join.
So, a question I ask all of my guests, as you know, is how do you connect with the Divine Feminine? And I realize this will change day to day, month to month. So,
Mhm.
what is your current connection with the Divine Feminine?
Okay, so for me, the two things like that really help me is number one, connecting with my womb, like the consciousness of my womb. So like just taking my consciousness like out of my mind and feeling it go right down into my actual, womb uterus area, kind of like focusing my attention on there for like a little while, and connecting that up with Mother Earth, right? Like a cord down to Mother Earth, the womb of Mother Earth. And doing that like on a regular basis and checking in with my womb like from time to time. Also, um, like following my cycle, like resting. Like right now I'm in the first day of my bleed. So it's like resting on, those kinds of days and things like that. And then the second thing is I feel like to really be in your feminine, you have to have like a healthy masculine frame to kind of like lean back into. Um, and if I'm not married, I'm actually divorced, and I'm not in a relationship right now. So for me, um that masculine frame is the masculine side of God. Like God has multiple different facets, but for me, I've been really healing my relationship with God the Father, especially because I have father wounds too. And so that just gives me a sense of safety and being taken care of, that like I can lean back into my feminine, because I don't feel like you can really do that if you're just have no support of any kind, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
That's so interesting you say that. So, on another note of the divine masculine, I I am not like dating, or I'm not dating anyone like in particular right now. I'm just kind of like dating around. And
Mhm.
I was talking to someone for a couple of weeks, which is like longer than I really had been talking to people. It just was like very like a one and done type of thing. And I had felt so alive and in my feminine just
Mhm.
from having a conversation with
Mhm.
a male that I
Mhm.
hadn't had these deeper connections in so long, because I'm super hyper independent and I have been for a very long time. And it's so interesting. I find that a lot of my friends who are single at an older age are feeling that, where they're like, yeah, I can handle things on my own. And we kind
Mhm.
of forget what
Mhm.
it's like to be in the presence
Yeah.
of divine masculine. And I was like, whoa, I forgot what it's like to be a woman in this way, where I can like flow and be feminine. And it's so different, like you said, when you have that safety and that base where you feel like you can be in that
Mhm.
flow because you have that
Mhm.
container for yourself. So, what is better than that, than on the deepest level, than tuning into the divine masculine
Yeah.
of however you connect with it?
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that about a man, because an actual man, so I will connect with the masculine face of God, and it's been really important in this time of my life. But I was just taking a walk recently, and and I met this man. He was, not single, who's married, and we just were talking. And I don't haven't spent like a lot of time around men because I'm coaching women, and like I'm not
Yeah.
married, and my father, like I said, I got father wounds, he's not in the picture. So I was talking to this man, and just his energy alone like caused a shift in me. And just I noticed like his questions, like he was just asking me like what I do, and I was telling him, and he had like these really direct questions that like helped me actually clarify like things for myself. And just being in like the presence of a man that's in his masculine, right, like is really supportive to a woman. And like we need that, like we can't do our lives alone. I don't believe that. And so like right now I'm connecting with this masculine form of God to help me through it. But I definitely plan on getting back into a relationship.
That's
Yeah.
so funny too, because I the same thing. Like, and I have two roommates who are women, and they're both teachers. And I was previously like a yoga studio manager, and I'm like, I'm literally never around guys, like
Yeah.
ever. Like, I'm always working in
Yeah.
these like women industries. I work with women, and so it's so funny when you see or you like interact with a man in real life, and you're like, whoa, like what is this like again? And
Mhm.
and it's just so nice. So, oh gosh, like yeah, feeling all of that so much. So I want to really go into your experience as a spiritual business owner, because so many women who listen to this podcast are wanting to start their business, and a lot of times it's just that getting started that gets really
Mhm.
difficult for them,
Mhm.
and it's really helpful for them to see, okay, how did you get started? How did you build enough trust for
Mhm.
yourself to make that leap? So I'm so curious, what inspired you to start your spiritual business in the first place?
I mean, I guess it was a kind of a really long time ago, but I always knew that I wanted to help people. And like I was working in finance, and obviously I wasn't really, I mean, I was helping that company like make money, right? But I wasn't like making an impact on people's lives. So I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I just didn't know like how, right? So I just kind of waited, I had to wait for a long time. It was a lot of years. I was waiting to be like, okay, what is it going to be? You know, and then like it started coming to me, like, basically things I was just interested in. I started pursuing them. And then I was like, these are the things that I'm going to use to help people with. And so I just always had this desire to do that. I don't know, like it's just been forever. And then now finally it's like at the point where I felt like I acquired the skills that I could do it.
Totally. It's so interesting because that like seed of desire has to be planted and it
Yeah.
can be really years for it to really like blossom and kind of see
Yeah.
like your own healing journey of what you're
Yeah.
into. But then it gets to a point where I think it gets so uncomfortable to
Yeah. Oh
be in
yeah.
that finance job
Oh
or
yeah.
to be in the identity that you were
Yeah.
before that you're like, I cannot go
Oh
on like
yeah.
this anymore. Like there needs to be a
Yeah.
change.
Yeah, like it was at the point where when I was doing the finance work, like, I did finance for 22 years. And I didn't like love it, like I said, but I was, there was some satisfaction in it, like getting things done and feeling like good about certain things I was doing. But at the end, it got to the point where like it was pain to do anything, do any of the work. And had not felt like that before. So I was like, this is just, becoming totally new person and I'm needing to move into this new direction because I couldn't even complete the tasks. I was like messing things up. I just didn't
Yeah,
care like how it went, and I was not like that. I'm not the kind of person that like doesn't care about my work and even if I don't like it, I have integrity, right? But it's like I just felt like I just didn't even care anymore, you know.
totally. It gets to that point, the first job that I took out of college was in fashion PR, and I thought I was going to go in the fashion industry. It was right before I got into the healing industry. And that is the same thing for me. I was so on
Yeah,
top of my game always. I was
yeah,
always getting promoted and getting
yeah,
accolades. And then all of a sudden, like I was just off my game and I was like, what is going on? And there was part of me, like the ego part of me was like pushing because like I wanted to show up in that same way and support the business
yeah,
that I was working for. But at the same time, my soul was like, I don't want this. So it was
yeah,
like
no,
secretly self-sabotaging it and being like,
yeah,
no, we need to take a distance from it.
yeah, yeah,
So a lot of healers they have difficulty trusting their gifts, especially even though spirituality is becoming so much more common. It's
mm.
that witch wound that we have of
Oh
being like,
yeah,
I want to share more about my
yeah,
spirituality and my gifts. And because it's not necessarily valued in our capitalistic society,
yeah,
it's hard. We go through that period of being like, am I gifted? Am I going to
yeah.
be able to help healers? So, what was kind of like that transformation where you were able to take that belief of, I don't know if I can trust myself to guide others to, no, I do have all the resources and beyond to do this.
Well, first of all, I think that this kind of work is really important because like God and the divine, like that is like the basis of should be the basis of our lives, like, and it's like I don't know how we could live without it, right? And but in our society, like it's not valued at all, and so people are really like missing something, and they know, but they don't maybe know what it is. And I'm not here to like to force anybody to go into spirituality, but I feel like people are being drawn into this because they know something's missing, because it really should be the center of our lives. Even if we're working in corporate America, like we could still have spirituality as the center of our lives, like guiding us. And to me, like I actually always wanted to teach about that, but I was like, I like the witch wound. Like I was like, this is like nobody's going to even listen, or they're just going to think I'm silly. And you don't almost don't even want people to know that you believe in these kinds of things, right? Because most people don't. And so I think getting around a lot of other people that feel similar to you, like helps you see that like, okay, like this is valued by people, right? Because in maybe finance, it wasn't. And so the first there's that. And then secondly, like I feel like I was just always counseling people and uplifting them. Like I noticed that I was uplifting people. And I have to say that at first I didn't pursue, like teaching and spirituality. I was like, I got to do more practical things. And that's how I got into Ayurveda. I did a couple of years of Ayurveda school. I did, herbalism training and that kind of thing. And because that felt like safer to me, that I could, easily share about that, and people would be interested in like actually sharing about like my spiritual beliefs felt like a bit risky, and honestly it still does in a way, like because there's kind of like this stigma around that, like people think you're weird or something. Like I remember even when I was a kid, like being in college at like the cafeteria, and some woman came up to us and was telling us about God, and we were just like laughing, like not to, we were trying to hide it that we were laughing, and I think back and I'm like, oh my God, like she now that might be me, but but like so it took some time, and I took this class one time about like learning how to speak on video, and like I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I may have told you about this before. I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody taking this class, but it was like they taught us how to just share like our deepest darkest secrets on video with all of these
Yeah,
people, and it's like it just kind of like shocked me into like just being authentic, like on camera, I guess. And so I just kind of like lost that feeling of like worrying what other people are thinking, because I mean, not that I don't still have it, but it's definitely like gone, gotten significantly less, you know, noticeable. And I think it's just with practice. Like you just
totally.
have to practice,
Totally.
like sharing what you think somehow in some way on a big scale. So probably on social media in some way.
Yeah. So I'm hearing the first part of it is coming back to like your mission, like why you're
Yeah.
doing this. It's from a heart-centered place. Like I
Yeah.
truly want to be able to help people to share this message. And I know it works because it worked for me in
Yeah.
my own healing
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
The next
Absolutely.
part of it is like you actually have to put in that masculine energy of getting the credentials and making sure you have proper education. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a title of anything, but having the experience and learning from
Mhm.
teachers who actually have the credentials and all that stuff. And then the kind of third piece of it is kind of going back to the belief system of like, okay, what part of me feels like I'm still scared of being seen? And a lot of times in the
Yeah.
beginning, it's for what your story is. Like the way that people
Yeah.
connect with you is your authenticity and your story. But the hardest part about sharing our story is that there's parts of it that feel still shameful to share, that we feel
Mhm.
like we have to hide because other people would think that that is
Mhm.
not a lovable part of
Mhm.
us. And the more that we can really own that and share that, the more
Mhm.
that people really connect with us.
Mhm.
But yeah, that may be more of like a traumatic way of going about it, but that's it. It's just really starting to
Mhm.
practice in front of the camera. I remember when we first started working together, you were like, no, I don't want to show my face. And I related to that so much because the first
Mhm.
year of my business on Instagram, I was like, I'm not showing my face. I'm not going to be, for
Mhm.
me, my story was I didn't want to be one of those typical Instagram people, like just an attention hog, like just wanting to like put their face all over. Like that was my
Yeah.
perceived conditioning of it, right? We all have got our own stories around it. And I realized I got kind of like coerced into making an Instagram story one day just about my morning routine. And it was simply just for simplicity so that a lot of people were asking about it and wanting it. So I just did it. And I love the process of it so much. So you kind of just have to like do the cold plunge and do it, whatever that works for you. It doesn't have to be like crying on camera telling your most traumatic
Mhm.
story
Yeah.
ever, but like,
Mhm.
it could be something small and you could really surprise yourself that you might enjoy that process because I realized, oh, I actually connected deeper with people when I allowed myself to be seen. And that's
Mhm.
really what I'm looking
Yeah.
for, is for other
Absolutely.
people's to be seen in that too.
Yeah. And if you think about like all the people that I've ever worked with, like as a coach, like them coaching me, right? I always had to know, to me, I have to know like something about that person. I need to see their face.
Yeah.
I need to know like their story. Like I like when they have podcasts, because then you can kind of listen and get to know someone, because for like trust reasons, I mean, I for me, I just kind of really need to get a feel of like who they are before I'll commit to working with them or something. And so I feel like that's the most powerful thing you can do, is share who you really are, right? And of course, like from a place, like if you're right in the middle of, like, I'm divorced, like I said, and when I was going through a divorce, like that wouldn't really have been probably an appropriate time for for me to be sharing about that, like, because it was, too new, right? But like after it's all over, those types of things are the things that people actually connect with the most, right? Is when you're being yourself.
Totally, totally. Did you have any other moments that you can recall where like this fear of being seen has shown up for your business, maybe like in the past or maybe currently?
Yeah, like I think, like I said, like I could see that it was shifting to helping people more rather than with like the Ayurveda and herbalism tools and nervous system techniques. It was more into like guiding them spiritually, and like sharing about that. That felt like a little bit triggering for me to do, right? Because it's, like I said, God and divine, father and mother, like that's not valued in our society
Mhm.
mostly. And actually a lot of people don't talk about it. So I was kind of
Right.
like afraid to share, but I really just felt like I had to, like there really wasn't any other choice. So that's, I did.
That's so interesting because right now, what I'm talking about with my community is how one of the ways that we had this fear of being seen is when we hide um, the real audience that we want to help, and when we
Yeah.
hide the real offering that we want to deliver, because
Yeah.
based on like what we feel is comfortable or what other
Yeah.
people might seem as like socially acceptable,
Yeah.
we just like kind of go into those phases of
Yeah.
life of being like, oh yeah, like so many times in my life I've been like, I'm a healer, like I just love to heal people and recommend like diet and lifestyle practices, and like secretly my soul was like, no, I want to go so much deeper with people, like.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've really transitioned to being more of an intuitive business coach where I love mentoring women so they can actually bring their businesses to life. But I had so much conditioning around, and I still do, around like business coach, and that
Yeah.
whole world is like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear from you about this. I think this is so important because so many healers are into spirituality and they're afraid of being too much or too spiritual or too out there. Like, whether that's the family member that's going to be like, whoa, she's lost her marbles, or it's that like friend from high school, you're going to be like, she's
Yeah.
living
Yeah. Of
off
course.
her
Oh
rocker.
my gosh. Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
is your transition? Because I think this conversation about God and using God, like I love
Yeah.
seeing your posts and those come up
Yeah.
and you own it and it's so confident.
Yeah.
But even for spiritual
Oh,
people, they're
yeah.
like, oh
Yeah.
God, like
Yeah.
what has been
That's
your
a
journey
huge
with
thing.
that?
Yeah. So I, again, I don't believe God is male or female. I believe it's not, able to be really defined, but there are aspects of it that of God that is masculine, right? And so that's right now what I've been working with, due to my feminine wounding that I've had, that's what I need, right? So yeah, I was really feeling called back to God, um compared to like the universe or source energy, right? Like that's kind of where it was in years ago, this universe source energy thing. And I was actually believed in God when I was younger. And I always found that comforting, and somehow I got pulled into like this universe source energy thing. And yeah, it was maybe in 2021 when like God called me back and was like, no, no, it's God. Like there is a God. Like the universe to me is just this, universe that's out there. It's kind of like passive. Like you can ask for the help if you want, and it's there to help. It's working for you, but you don't really see it. You don't really feel it. God came to me and was like, no, I'm not passive. I am active and I am pursuing you. Like I am right here in every moment. And it was being shown to me that was actually happening. And then God was like, you're going to share about me, and I was like, oh no, like I can't, I don't want to, or I feel like a little bit strange about it. And even some people that, like I have done work with, like they're not maybe into that or whatever, but that's, God is like, this is what you're going to teach about. And I don't want to teach about anything else. So I mean, it's not that I only teach about God, I teach about many other things, like related to the nervous system and things like that, but always with coming back to healing with God as our support system. Right.
Totally.
And so like I just was really being told by God this is what you're going to do, you know? And the things that I share on Instagram are things that God is just saying to me. And then I just, put it out there. And I feel like when I'm speaking to other people, God will be saying something to me, right? So it's really scary to do that, right? Because it did feel triggering to me, but like nothing else comes more easily, right? Like even though I did all that training on Ayurveda, like if you and me were talking about Ayurveda right now, it would not be flowing as easily as it does when I talk about God. That's how I know too, like I know so much information about Ayurveda. It's crazy, but when I'm talking, it doesn't flow as easily and I have to it just doesn't it's not as pleasurable to talk about it. And so that's just how I know, you know.
Definitely. I When you start talking about God and that specificity, and you saying some clients may not resonate with that, but I'm interested in working with the clients who are,
Yeah.
that is so huge and a huge ownership because so often, especially in the beginning of our business, it's really difficult for us to niche down. One of the biggest things that I work on is with clients is with this because they think that, well, I have to be for everyone.
Yeah.
But you start to lose your
Mhm.
message and lose yourself and you as the CEO of your company and what you're meant to do. Like, you're not meant to help everyone. You might start to expand your clientele later on, but speak to what works for you and own that. And you're going to attract your people because they're going to feel like that deeper connection in that way.
Yeah, and I've even had people, like even a friend of mine was saying that she doesn't use the word God because some people are triggered by that in the spiritual communities. And she doesn't really have to because of like the work that she does. She doesn't have to use the
Right.
word God, even though she does, feels that energy like I do. But I'm like, no, I can't take that out because it's the basis of my work.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to convince anybody about it. If they are
Right.
not interested in that, that's fine. But if they are, here I am. And I also have to say that there are so many people being called back to God over over the universe and source energy. Like it's a huge thing. Like I just keep seeing more and more people, women. I don't know about men. I think men too, actually, being called back, to claiming God again because the universe just isn't supportive enough in my mind. And if you've been through really difficult times, like you need someone to count on. You cannot live your life alone. And it's God that's going to, be with you and support you and guide you like in everything. Like if we really think that there's no God, like there's so many options out there in the world. There's so many jobs we could have. There's so many people we could date. How do we find the ones that work? I mean, it's like it's almost crazy that there isn't something directing that because it's like if you're just out there hoping that you're going to meet the one or something, the chances of it actually happening, if you think about it, are probably very low because there's so many people in the world or locally, whatever. How do you actually end up coming across that person or that particular job that works for you or meeting, whoever? Recently, God directed me actually to some kind of church, which I was actually very triggered about too. I was like, oh my gosh, no. And it's not like a regular church like you would think, but it's been really healing for me. And I would have never found it without the guidance and the direction, of God. And God will show me like signs that lead me there. And that's how I know. But yeah, like, that's what I can help people with, and if they're not interested in that, right, I don't really think I can help them, right? So what would be the point in me trying to make my message be for everyone? Because if they actually wanted to work with me, what could I really do, right?
Totally. Totally. I love that idea of being really specific and being very clear in your messages. I think that's
Yeah.
something, and manifesting that, in New Age spirituality, we talk about manifesting of just like putting it out there, or, I mean, people make lists and things like that, but there has to be that specificity of, yeah, who you're reaching out to, and like, is it this nebulous entity, or are you being really clear on that connection? Because when you are an intuitive too, like, you need to be able to like tune into that to be able to get
Mhm,
those like clearer messages
mhm.
and have them coming through you, and there really is no better feeling. Like, I love guiding healers to do that and to constantly come back to that practice, because that's what's going to continuously guide them throughout their life, is like knowing how to direct themselves and being guided by that source. I'm so curious to hear, like, so what I'm hearing is your relationship with God is the thing that like builds the most self-trust, like hands
Yeah,
down. And I can
yeah.
totally agree. Like having that consistency in your life is
Yeah.
everything. Are there other rituals and routines that you do for your body and your business that can really also help to flex and nurture that trust muscle?
Um, so for me, like I said, I like doing womb, connecting with my womb, right? Because I feel like that's kind of where like as women we connect in with God too, because like it's basically a portal for beings, and of babies, right? And that's where God is sending them through. So, but so I feel like I like connecting regularly with my womb, um, at least a couple times a week in the morning, right? And I feel like that helps me connect to my creativity. I like I use God as the masculine kind of as my boss almost, right? Because as a feminine being, like I like to be directed and just do what I'm told, kind of. It's not that I don't use my creativity, I do, but like God's kind of like do these things today,
Mhm.
and so I'm like, okay, I just do that, and I find that helps because otherwise I'm like, I don't know, and what am I supposed to do? There's a million things I could do, right? And I'll just kind of have that guidance of like do these things. And I think like you just have to, sometimes you're afraid or you don't know what to do. You just have to take some steps to do it or make some moves or something, because like it can be overwhelming, right? Like there's a lot of things like I had to build a website. I'm selling products like on the website. I, want to connect with people on social media, things like that. Like there's so many things to do that can be overwhelming, and you just have to um, take steps and try it, I guess. I don't know how else to do it because you can get paralyzed if you think there's just too much to do, right? So you just have to take some steps for even if they seem like they're small, even just like researching about how to build a website or where to even do that, just starting there or something.
Totally. Yeah, I think with Vata entrepreneurs or those that can relate to that energy type in some part of their business, that's the thing, right? Like because you are so connected to your intuition and getting these ideas, there's so many that are constantly
Oh
flowing through
yeah,
you, which is
tons.
amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to keep that flow, you don't want to
Mhm.
diminish that, but then it becomes really nebulous of like, oh, like which one do I focus on? And
Yeah.
is this going to be the
Yeah.
right one or the
Yeah.
wrong one? Like
Yeah.
so many different avenues. So it's so helpful to have those grounding practices so that you can focus on just a few things at a time, and doesn't mean those amazing ideas aren't just like put in some other way, but just like we said with like planting seeds, that seed
Yeah.
sometimes it may take like 10 years for
Yeah.
that idea to really
Yeah.
come into fruition. Like and just because the idea comes through you in that moment doesn't mean it needs
Mhm.
to be jumped on. So it's really like you said, having a practice that can ground you and you can focus on just a couple of things at a time, so you can still get the needle moving and you don't feel paralyzed in taking that next step.
Yes, because that can happen to me where I get tons of ideas. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is just crazy. There's too many things. All these ideas are coming in. So I will have to like stop and write them down and stuff, because they'll be coming in while I'm like taking a walk or something. It's usually when that happens, or taking a shower or something, right? So you're like, oh, I need to post about this. I need to share about this. I need to do this. I got to do this. And so then I will kind of write all those down. And then, like I said, God kind of guides me, work on this one next, do this one next, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a practice. Like I remember when we were working together and you were like working on getting those clearer downloads, and you're like, well, I get them all the time, I just like don't write them down, and like it takes
Okay.
a while for you to be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm getting this idea, now I'm going to start to write it down and have that bit of a process that like kind of is a
Yeah.
transition. But
Yeah.
once you do, that becomes so great because that creativity is just going to keep on building, and that's what helps you get started in your business.
Yes, and then, like, I feel like when you get the ideas, like, you're sometimes in a place, like, where you can't do anything about it, right? Like, I'm not gonna write an Instagram post while I'm taking a walk, So you get it seems like all the ideas come, like, when you're for me, when I'm, like, taking a walk or something, right? So
Exactly.
I just write them down as much as I can, and I'll just kinda, free flow it into, like, and some notes on or even voice note it. And then later when I'm like, "Oh, I wanna write this Instagram post," sometimes I'm not really that inspired, but I'm like, "Oh, okay, I have this." So I go reread that, And then I start just writing that down, making it into a post, and then more comes. But like if I, because
Yeah.
you want to set up some time to be like, okay, today I'm going to create some content or whatever. But then when you sit down, you don't actually have any inspiration. But if you already wrote down all the things that were inspiring you before, then you can go back, look at that, and it kind of like gets you back into that. Also, for me, I feel like when I'm not having any inspiration too, I like to get some kind of like visual, like I'll look and I'll be like, okay, this is what God wants me to share. He told me on this walk or whatever. And so then I'll be like, all right, what does that look like in a picture or something? And then I'll get a picture to post, or some, like some kind of background to the post. And then that gets me kind of into the inspiration again. And then I start typing it on there, and then more starts coming through.
This is such a great example of how a lot of Vata entrepreneurs can tap into their creativity. So thank you
Uh,
for sharing your process. But by tuning into your intuition and your
yeah,
intuitive gifts, you get those downloads. And
yeah,
I find the gift that Vatas have a lot is clairvoyance, is that vision and
yeah,
that
yeah,
sight. And
yeah,
that's also because a lot of Vata entrepreneurs, I know we talked about this with your business, you love beauty and aesthetics. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
very grounding for you. It makes you
yeah,
feel safe. Like
yeah,
if you go on someone's website and you're like, oh, like
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
working with you. Like it needs to
yeah,
feel like beautiful. And
yeah,
so that would be how you can get into your own business. Like sometimes I'm not
absolutely.
inspired to write. Usually that is kind of my gateway is if like I'm writing something and then I'll
Yeah,
just kind of get into that mode.
yeah.
But if not, I love starting with aesthetics. Like
Mhm,
what feels
mhm,
beautiful right now. And
mhm,
it's just like when you go to a painting class or like if I go and take a dance
mhm.
class, it turns the faucet on for the creativity.
Yeah.
Then like all the juices start flowing.
Yeah, that's how it works for me. The writing is hard for me. I've always struggled with writing. It's kind of a thing. I think that I'm gonna be able to move past it. I think, I struggled with writing probably from like school or perfectionism or something, but the visual, like if I can get like I kind of know what I want to say, and I'm like, well, now I want to, what is that going to look like in a picture? And then I start getting excited, if I have some picture that I want to have on the post or something, or just a color or whatever.
Yeah, that's such a good example too of when we get challenges as entrepreneurs. I think like there's there's rhetoric out there that's like if it doesn't feel good, then like don't do it for your business. But I
Yeah,
think it's really a balance between yes, like let it feel good for you, and then also like there are going to be things that are quote unquote hard for your business that like are
yeah,
uncomfortable, but they're
yeah.
pushing you beyond your resistance. And it doesn't mean that you have to go about them in the way that you think you have to go about it. Like if writing's not your thing, like you're not
Yeah,
going to sit yourself down and write. But I
yeah.
love that. It's like you're looking for a pathway and an opening that can make it more easeful to get into that phase of writing. And then it's just going to take practice. Like not
Mhm,
every part of your business, like for me, it's the finance stuff and budgeting. Like I hate that stuff. It's not very fun, but I've
yeah,
now created my own process to like
yeah.
have fun and make it enjoyable. And now I actually feel really empowered to do that part of my business.
Mhm. Yeah. So, yeah, I know what you mean. Because even technical stuff, like stuff on websites and stuff like that, like, or that stuff doesn't bother me. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. And the finance stuff is fine. Like, I used to work in finance. It doesn't bother me either. It's the stuff where I'm actually, because that's just easy. Someone tells you just do it and it's just facts. You just you figure out what you got to do and you just do it. But it's like this stuff where I really have to like, connect in with myself and show myself. That's where I, can struggle, right? Because it's like, I guess it's the creativity part. Like, even though I do have a lot of that Vata, sometimes the creativity gets a little bit blocked from, you know, thinking about what others are going to think about you, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, it's just practice though.
That
It's just doing it. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's that fear of being seen. And it's you just have to know what your thing is. And for healers, a lot, you're gonna resonate with the fear of being seen and how it shows up in all these different
Yeah.
costumes. And then that's where the block is. And it's really that's why I say your business is your body, like 90%, because it's truly just an unblocking. And once you can get
Yeah.
out of your way, like things start flowing so well.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love to hear like what is new and exciting in your business that you would like to share with our audience.
So recently I kind of learned this really cool way, and to work with trauma with God, right? So like that's been my past. Like I have a lot of trauma in my past, and I've just been working on healing it my whole life, right? And it's been a challenge up until like the past couple of years. And really when I was connecting with God was when I really started to see things moving. And so like I've been learning of this new way where you take the trauma like creates like a lie that you believe about yourself, right? Like, so whatever thing happened, it creates some kind of belief like, oh, life is, not safe or whatever, and it's because of this thing that happened to you, and you start like believing that lie. And then of course as you're believing that, you're seeing like more evidence of that. So in your life. And so you can take that. Well, first of all, you ask God, why do I feel like this? And God can show you the lie. Especially if you don't know how to connect with God well, obviously someone can help you with that. And then God will show you the lie, and then God can show you where it came from, and then you can ask God to see what He thinks about that, right? And then heal that. So it's like trauma healing with God. And so that's what I've really been excited about lately, because it just seems to be the most effective way of dealing with trauma, at least in my perspective. So that's what I've kind of been working on. And yeah, like that's the direction things are going for me.
I love that. Awesome. Yeah, I simply just love following you, and the way that you share your channel messages from God are so beautiful. And yeah, I'll link your Instagram because I love following you on Instagram and your website and things, so people can get to know how to work with you more. And also your apothecary too, you were mentioning.
Yes, so I do have an apothecary because like I said, I've been a flower essence practitioner for 4 years, and and an herbalist as well. And so I make a lot of my own medicines. And the I decided to split these two businesses, where spiritual mentorship is a separate business, and then I have a store where I sell products. And mostly the products are focused on like anxiety, depression, the herbs. And then I have a bunch of flower essence blends for like creating joy, connecting. I have one for connecting with God and like how knowing how loved you are by God. I have, I'm working on something for ancestral healing right now. And so that is called the Radiant Rose. I think I don't remember what it is, but I'll send you what the Instagram label is, because Radiant Rose I think was popular. I had to add like a couple of periods or something in there. So yeah, and I'm just starting that now, because like I said, I had it combined with Lindsey Smith and Instagram, but now I'm going to have two separate accounts, and I think I'm going to start selling those products on Etsy rather than my website.
Amazing. Well, we'll have that apothecary linked below. That sounds absolutely amazing. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story and your process and journey as a spiritual entrepreneur. I know so many of our audience members relate to having those Vata tendencies. So it's so helpful to
Mhm.
have someone who has been through it and is able to transform that into really trusting themselves and building such a deep relationship with God and their clients. So thank you for
Yeah.
coming on, Lindsey.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.